Hi Collette.
Hi there. Right.
How did you get involved with the West Cumbria Dyslexia Association?
I got involved with the West Cumbria Dyslexia Association because I noticed one of my children at school was having great difficulty with the reading and the writing, and mainly with things like getting letters back to front, numbers, they didn't know the left from the right, just mainly struggling in school really, and the frustration was a big problem at home and at school. And obviously I did go into school and explain to the teacher that I thought there may be some underlying dyslexia, because I'm dyslexic myself, so I kind of knew the signs to look for, reading and writing, and very slow processing of information.
What do you think was the most helpful to parents coming along for the first time?
A lot of people think dyslexia is just about reading and writing. They can't read and write, and it's so much more because it affects children, and every child, I think, it affects children in different ways as well. One might have a problem with reading, one might be writing, one might be processing, might even be things like a balance, even numbers, and learning to read, learning the times tables, because it's a sequence. Sequences sometimes are really difficult for young children, even older children really as well, even teenagers. And I think the older the child gets, if it's not diagnosed at a very, very early age, they're very good at trying to cover it up that they're not dyslexic. They might try and say, well, I don't want to read that, I don't really like reading, I prefer to do other things.
Yes, the older they are, the more the emotional side of it builds up and becomes bigger and bigger, doesn't it?
That's it, yeah.
In fact, sometimes it seems bigger than the dyslexia.
This is it, yeah. I think really it's just not just necessarily schools, I think it's workplaces as well. So obviously I know we were talking about the children, but teachers being aware of what dyslexia means really, so maybe some awareness days in schools, not necessarily just in secondary schools, in primary schools, infant schools, even making nursery teachers aware of the signs when they're very, very young. So I think a lot of people think that you can't really notice the signs in very, very young children, but I think when children are starting even 3 or 4 years old, you can sometimes see this, especially if you've got another child similar age. You can see the difference.
Child
you can
at
see,
that age,
this is it.
Then even though they may show it in a different way, you still realise sort of what the underlying difficulties are that are going on. And as you say, you can see it.
Because obviously they're going to be learning in a very similar way. They might not learn exactly to the letter, but they're going to go through the same learning process. And I think you can see the differences, especially if they're not picking something up at kind of maybe a milestone that they should have maybe. It just gives you, if you know some of the symptoms, maybe not symptoms, some of the things that they maybe can't do. I think if there's something out there for parents to kind of check, like a little checklist, or maybe even teachers have a checklist or an understanding of different things that affect children who may be dyslexic, then I think that's going to make people more aware and talk about it as well.
The more information, the better. I mean, 20 years ago when we set up, there seemed to be very little information, very little awareness out there.
I think there's a lot more now, isn't there, for the different websites.
I think there's a lot more understanding. The difficulty, of course, is getting the help for the children.
That's right, and also the parents feeling that confident to go to schools and say, I think my child's either dyslexic or there's some other problem. What can you do about it? What are you willing to do? Because I think a lot of parents feel like they shouldn't say that, they haven't got a voice to be able to say that because they're the teachers and they're the parents. I think some parents don't feel like they're going to be listened to.
It can be the most difficult thing, can't it?
And it's your child, because it's such an emotional thing to talk about. Because you're giving your child over to that school, you want to know that everything's being done that's possibly can be done, so that the effects aren't going to get worse as they get older as well.
But I think it's just often difficult for parents to talk to teachers, isn't it? Especially if they're dyslexic themselves and they've had a difficult time at school.
Definitely,
They can feel really emotional about just walking into school.
Because it is a very big emotional thing to open up and say to anybody really, I'm dyslexic, I find reading and writing difficult, because I think a lot of people don't think that people are going to understand them. And really,
it's hard for adults as well.
It is, yes, it is. It's really big, because I think sometimes you think people are not going to take you serious, because when they hear the word dyslexia, they think, oh, she can't read and write. And it isn't just about reading and writing,
No.
it's so much more. Some people don't have
most dyslexics do learn to read.
Yes, they do.
It's all the other things that
it's
go with it.
everything else that comes along with it, because you've tried to hide it for so long and you haven't seen the help that you needed to help you with everything else that you've kind of put back and pretended it hasn't been a problem. That's where all those things lie, don't they? It's kind of open Pandora's box, really, isn't it, really?
Well, often adults have sort of struggled for years but managed to get through somehow. But then they'll come to a crisis point.
This is it. If they decide to change their career, or something happens, I think.
Or there's some extra demand at work that didn't used to be there before.
That's it, yeah. And then it kind of, this is, I think, when you realise that you do need to get help, or even just, find some information. I think sometimes just talking to people, or finding people that maybe struggle at work, but they haven't wanted to talk either. Some kind of support group or something.
If you've been hiding it, just talking to somebody is a big help.
That's it, yeah. And I think you'll always find in a workplace, you'll always find there may be somebody else there as well, but they necessarily don't want to be the first person to talk about it. That's it, yeah.
That's true, because dyslexics are a minority, but they're a big minority.
Yeah, definitely.
So there's always somebody else there who's struggling with the same problems.
That's it, it's true, yeah.